Being a woman of the book may refer to those who seek to be obedient to God's instructions. But I want to focus today on another aspect of being of the book. Jewish people being back in the land God promised them, the land of the book. Let's turn to the book in Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." When God made his covenant with Abraham, it was for a people and a land. The two are inextricable. This covenant was unconditional. In Genesis 15, we read about the covenant of the pieces. In that day, it was customary to cut a covenant, meaning animals were cut in two and both parties involved walked between the pieces of the animals, basically indicating what would happen should either party break their end of the agreement. In this case, God puts Abraham to sleep, into a deep sleep, and he himself passes between the pieces, thus indicating he was solely responsible for keeping this covenant. And he has. There is also the Mosaic covenant, which had conditions for being in the land based on obedience, and as we know, exiles were required and enacted, the longest lasting close to 2,000 years. Yet the land was never revoked as their possession, but rather temporarily taken away due to disobedience, and many parents can relate to this method as a consequence. In Ezekiel 36, God tells the branches on the mountains of Israel to spring forth fruit because his people are coming home. And the reason? For the sake of his holy name, which was profaned because his covenant people were not in the land he promised to give them. What kind of God is this? Can't keep his promises. His name was profaned. Today, we are living in the days which the prophets only dreamed of. Against all odds, Israel was reborn in 1948, and his covenant people are flooding back from the four corners of the earth. While a modern miracle and the culmination of thousands of years of prayers, the return was not a walk in the park. The mountains of Israel, which is the biblical heartland where most of the Bible took place, called Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland are the mountains of Israel. They may have longed to produce this fruit, but Jewish people were not allowed to live there soon after its rebirth. It was illegally occupied by Jordan and renamed the West Bank after the War of Independence, during which all Israel's neighbors attacked her on the very night Israel was reborn. The new borders were and are certainly much less than its boundaries given by God in Genesis. And the borders ratified by the United Nations in the 1947 Partition Plan was also vastly reduced than the original offer of a Jewish homeland in 1917's Mandate for Palestine. In fact, by 1947, only 17% remained for the one Jewish homeland in the world, one they so desperately needed after the Holocaust. If there had been a Jewish homeland, there would not have been a Holocaust. Of that remaining 17%, 60% was desert. The rest consisted of the coastal plain, as well as malaria-filled swamps in the north. The land had largely been denuded of trees due to the tree tax under the previous Ottoman Empire, and was badly in need of loving care and miracles. Our guest today is one of the women who saw firsthand a portion of land near the Dead Sea go from salt-encrusted sand dunes to world-famous botanical gardens visited by royalty. Truly a modern-day miracle, as well as the result of back-breaking work and perseverance. Daniela Cohen has lived on Kibbutz Ein-Gedi for 51 years. She has a Canadian connection as she was born in Vancouver and also lived in Beverly Hills, California. Kibbutz Ein-Gedi, where I would live if I had any place from which to choose in the world, is a virtual Garden of Eden overlooking the lowest place on the earth, the Dead Sea. She has wonderful stories to tell us about this remarkable journey. The Proverbs 31 verse I have chosen for Daniela is verse 18. She discerns that her business is good. Her lamp never goes out at night. Welcome, Daniela Cohen. It is just such a privilege to be with you today. I know you're in my very favorite place in Israel right now, and I'm so jealous that I can't be there with you. But, you know, when I signed up to take the tour of the Botanical Gardens, after we were leading our tour, some of my colleagues and I stayed later, and we saw a little card that looks like this for a tour of the Botanical Gardens. And little did we know what an incredible place and the wealth of not just plants, but of history that you would share with us. So how can you tell us about your witness of this incredible transformation from salt-encrusted sand to what is now a world-famous botanical garden in Ein-Gedi?
I'm so excited to be with you and so thrilled to share this time with you. I don't know how to begin. You know, En-Gedi is a place that's written about 5 times in the Bible. Whether you're speaking about David before he became king, that he hid out at Nahal David, which is just 5 minutes from the kibbutz. Whether you're speaking about the Chalcolithic period 5,000 years ago, whether you're speaking about a desert that's one of the hottest in the world, whether you're speaking about 1,000 plants from every corner of the world, where you have succulents and you have trees from Africa, from China, from India, you have succulents. And you have trees from tropical America, one next to the other. And you have 80 young people, 22 years old, who have no idea about agriculture. They have only a dream. They have only a dream. And they're coming from Israel, from Tel Aviv, from Haifa, from Jerusalem. And they're crossing a desert that has no roads, coming from Dimona. And instead of taking an hour and a half to get from Jerusalem to En-Gedi, where there were no roads at all, they're taking between 8 and 10 hours to come to a true wilderness. To begin what became one of the most beautiful botanical gardens in all of the country. It wasn't meant to be a botanical garden at all, but you know, we had to make it a place where people could live, where children could grow up. That's just a little bit of a beginning. Where did they come to? They came to fields down below the plateau where we're living now. It was covered by rocks, and it was so long ago that people lived there. And they began to plant. They planted tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini and eggplant, and everything grew. Why does everything grow so well at En-Gedi? You see, this was a desert that was covered by the Dead Sea, or my husband prefers it to be called the Salt Sea. it was covered, all of this desert and all of the mountains. In the Dead Sea, there's 27 different kinds of minerals. They're all in our land. There is more oxygen here than any place in the world because we are in the lowest place in the world. We have so little rain, so very little rain, but we have 4 different places that the water is coming out of the ground in the mountains. And it's so pure, this water, we drink it as it comes out of the mountains. And what can I tell you more? What can I tell? Ask me and I will tell you.
Okay.
Help me.
Because you're absolutely right. One of the things I noticed in my first trip to Ein-Gedi is the air. There's something in the air, and it's scientifically proven that there's more oxygen and maybe some of the Dead Sea minerals. But on my first visit to the kibbutz, which is where you live, and that was settled many years ago, and you have seen yourself this transformation, our tour group couldn't even hold hands and put our arms around some of the trees. And we marveled because we saw pictures that in 1958, there was nothing at all. It was just plain desert. And here, at that time, it was just 60 years later, there was this just remarkable, lush flora and fauna. And I want you to tell me what you yourself saw, how you and your husband were part of this transformation, because I know it was also God, because this couldn't have happened without God's blessing and just miracle of seeing the desert bloom. But it was a lot of hard work. And I know that you played many roles in the hard work that went into making Kibbutz Ein-Gedi what it is today. So tell us about some of your stories of planting, of looking after the children.
Let me tell you a mineral that I think perhaps you were looking for. One of the minerals in the Dead Sea is called bromide. It's also used in the making of tranquilizers. So you should see our people. We're happy and content all the time, and you sleep better here because of it. You're breathing it into the air. We can talk about so many different things. You know, this is the first place in Israel that there were vegetables in the winter time, because we had no vegetables at all, not at all. My husband was one of the men who planted 1,000 date trees below the kibbutz. The dates that we have that are most used in Israel and today most liked are called majul. And they are some of the better dates that are known in the world because of the different conditions that we have for growing them here. And well, it's known that 4,000 years ago even, there were date trees growing down below. As a matter of fact, one day when they decided to plant in another place on the kibbutz, down below, before we came up to this plateau in 1960, they found an ancient synagogue, 1,600 years old. And it's all done in beautiful mosaic tile, this wonderful floor that they found, and there is writing on it. And on the floor, one of the things that it says is that there is a secret in En-Gedi. And perhaps one of the secrets, we don't know, because they didn't leave us any hints, but perhaps one of the hints was a plant called a farsimon. It has no connection to a plant that you eat, or fruit that you eat rather, persimmon, but it was used to make perfume, and it was worth its weight in gold. And it said that the Queen of Sheba, perhaps she came from Yemen, or there are other archaeologists that said perhaps she came from India. Not known for sure, but it's a thought. In the meantime, she came to King Solomon, bringing with her gold and jewels and trees and perfume. And these trees were planted here at En-Gedi. Well, when we came to live here, they were not here any longer. However, a botanist from England and from Germany was traveling in the Saudi Arabian desert, and he found perhaps 5 trees that could have been the same afarsimon or myrrh. The same myrrh that they used in the great temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
And these seeds were planted and they are growing. And we have a secret garden at En-Gedi with 100 of these trees. And now perhaps once again, maybe 6,000 trees are going to be planted down below the kibbutz to see if the medicine that was made then and the perfume, perhaps it will be again. But in the meantime, our main source of income comes from tourism. We have the hotel that you stayed in, the En-Gedi Hotel, which is managed by a very young man called Tom Geva, who grew up on this kibbutz. And slowly, the children from the kibbutz are taking our place in managing the different places that we have on the kibbutz. National Geographic chose us as one of the 11 most beautiful places in nature to visit while you're staying in this country.
Oh, I would put it up at the top, actually, myself. But there are so many beautiful places in Israel, and that's what I love to share with people, that Israel is not all dry and dusty. You can be skiing on Mount Hermon, and you can be scuba diving in Eilat in just a few hours, and then there's this beautiful desert beauty, and there's tropical, lush places. But Daniela, I want you to tell me, and because I know there are also places to stay, not just in the kibbutz hotel, but in people's homes, and we'll have that information available after. But I want you to tell me about the early days of the kibbutz, and you were talking about how your husband was planting the date seeds, and it must have been a real act of faith to say, we're going to put these little trees in, and there's just salty sand, and we hope they grow. And I have tasted the dates. That's your main income source at the kibbutz, if I'm not right. Tell us about some of your time looking after the children and some of the challenges there. There's some funny stories now. I'm sure it was very hard work at the time, but.
Victoria, it's true that I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, but I grew up in Beverly Hills, California, and I studied to become a baby nurse, which I came here, I thought to be. But they told me, no, first we have to get to know you. To the kitchen you go. And so I washed a lot of dishes and peeled a lot of potatoes before I got to take care of babies, that they thought that maybe, just maybe, I could possibly be good enough to do that. So for many years, in the beginning years, I did work with new babies, 6 weeks old. And at that time, the children slept not at home with their parents, but in the children's houses. That is, every day they would come home at 4 o'clock until 8 o'clock at night. And then we would bring them back according to age. They slept in the different children's houses. Children, if you can call them a product, they are our most important. They're diamonds, and so much goes into their education. And they were so well taken care of, but it was very hard work. It was working from 7 o'clock in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon with 6 babies at a time. And there were no disposable diapers. And there was no formula that you just shake up and down and you have something ready. It was very hard work. And at 4:30, that doesn't mean you come home. You go down to plant the tomatoes and pick the tomatoes because we needed to support ourselves. We began with nothing, thinking that, as I told you, we began with 80 people. Today, we're about 480 people. There are almost 200 members on our kibbutz that began with 80. And our grammar school and high school was here. And we chose people to educate our children in all things, whether it be ballet or sports. And they grew up children of the earth, children that had no fear, children that had no worries of the city. They could see their parents anytime during the day. We worked on the kibbutz, but it wasn't easy. Victoria, it wasn't easy. And we did become the second kibbutz out of 300 different kibbutzim in Israel to bring our children home to sleep. A much better way. The kibbutzim in the north had to continue for quite a long time because the country was not a safe place at that time. Here, thank God, we have never known war. We've always been a very safe place to be. People who come here, whether it's from China, and we did have before Corona, thousands and thousands of people coming from China, they stand in awe when they're standing in the gardens of what came about from nothing. You know, I wonder if you know the story of Brigadoon.
I
a
do.
town that comes to earth once in 100 years.
A musical,
I've
yes.
always thought of, I've always thought of En-Gedi as Brigadoon. It is a place, even today, after living here 51 years, it is a wonder. It is a wonder to all of us.
Did the sense that you were fulfilling prophecy, that the people were coming back after 2,000 years as prophesied, did that keep you going in spite of all the hardships?
You know, the prophecy of Ben Gurion, when we were traveling, my husband and I, around the country to find a place to live, where could it be? On the Golan Heights or near the Gaza Strip or in the Jordan Valley? Ben Gurion, our former first prime minister, said, go to the desert, go to the Negev and have children. And so when we came here to En-Gedi, my husband said to me, you know, Daniela, I don't know if you're going to like it here. You're so romantic. You want to live beside the Mediterranean Sea and hear the sound of the waves. And somehow I thought, we're going to build something here. It's going to be a miracle if we can do it. I've come all this way. I've left my family. It must be something that's brought me here. My family were born in the old city of Jerusalem for over 300 years. There is a synagogue there, the most famous of the 120 synagogues, called the Herva Synagogue. And there my grandfathers for generations were judges.
Right in the old city.
Somehow, all of those things together said to me, I have to make a beginning with my husband. My children have to feel that something was accomplished by coming to this place. And you know, when you look at these trees, these beautiful trees everywhere, we know that it wasn't just us. Man cannot make a tree alone. And so I feel that so much that God was behind us, and we have done something while we're in this world that will last. And the people who are coming here feel this very greatly when they come here.
It absolutely is true. And you're saying because of this, just the beauty, and as hard as it was, and the children having to be away from their parents, the children don't want to leave. They just keep coming back. Why would you want to live anywhere else? And it's not, they realize maybe that making a living in a city where it's a hustle and bustle isn't really as nice as being in a place where there's just such beauty and peace and community. But Daniela, I want to ask you, how did the idea, I know dates are the main product that supports the kibbutz and is your income source, but where did the idea of a botanical garden with these rare specimens begin? And tell us about some of the most unusual specimens you have there.
I would love to. Our garden began with a man, not from the kibbutz. His name was Michael Avishai, and he was the manager of the Botanical Garden in Jerusalem. And there is a lady, today she's 83 years old, Nitza Chofish. She's still working every day in the gardens, and they got together. And also from the Negev, there was a huge botanical garden. It's a special place. It's called the Machon Volcanic. And from there, they gave us many, many plants and trees from all over the world that had been grown as seeds and very small plants. And they were brought to us, and we had no idea whether they needed sun or shade, a lot of water, just a little bit of water, but we planted, and they all answered to us. Today, we're much more clever. Today, we plant only things that take very little water. The Volcanic Institute in Rishon is very well known, but there is something called Keren Kayemet, which supplies trees all over Israel. And they sent us many of our trees too. We even have a holiday in our religion for the trees, celebrated by the children, where they plant new plants and trees all over the kibbutz. One of the plants that only grows here from all of Israel is called adenium. It's the desert rose. And it's quite amazing. For all winter, it has no leaves and no flowers. And suddenly you wake up in the spring and it's covered by beautiful pink and red flowers that just go on and on and on. And of course, the baobab trees that come from Africa. You were speaking about how it took so many people to put their arms around it. A tree that lives for 2,000 years. And yet we planted it so small. And there are trees from Brazil that have grown so beautifully here too that you can't even see the top of them.
Tell us about the tree. I love this story that only blooms once a year in the middle of the night. And you said you can see all the people in the kibbutz running in their pajamas to see the one night when the tree blooms.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yes, it just finished just now from the middle of May. It's called Queen of the Night. You really did remember being here. Yes, the Queen of the Night. It just sits and looks so forlorn all the year around. And then one night, it has, like a rose would have, a bud. And all of a sudden, it has this long red bud. And we know that night, we're going to run for our cameras, for it blooms from 8 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. And then it dies just one single night. But it's so spectacular. But that's only one of 1,000.
Tell us about some of your very famous visitors to the botanical garden.
Yes, I would love to tell you. I would love to tell you. Imagine that the president of China walked along inside our garden and he reached out his hand to shake. And I'm thinking to myself, where in the world could this possibly happen in this tiny little place in Gedi, in the lowest place in all of the world? But before I knew it, who came next? Mr. Gorbachev, Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev. He is an agronomist is more correct, and he wanted to know how dates could possibly grow in the desert. And so he came and he had quite a conversation with my husband. His beautiful wife, Larisa, living then, came with him. And she asked me so many amazing questions, just like we're talking now. Yes, she spoke to me in Russian and I answered her in Hebrew. It was quite an interesting conversation. But there are people, princes and princesses, coming from every corner of the world. It's hard to imagine what brings people here. I only know one thing. Once people come here, it's like something they've never seen before, and they'll always return. So when I say goodbye, I never really say our word shalom. I say our word litraot, which means we'll see you soon. And see them soon I will, for they must come back to see what they remember. What I didn't tell you also, that besides our hotel, a new venture is made by some of the people who have lived here. They've attached apartments to their homes. They're called simmer, funny word, but they've made beautiful apartments. And it's not just the apartment. Each person that's made these apartments are very special in themselves and want people who come to visit to have a feeling that they're at home. So these people come for 2 or 3 days to experience what is it like to live on a kibbutz. You know, Victoria, the word kibbutz means communal farm. This is the only place in the world where this exists. And it's an interesting experience. Victoria, you yourself say you want to come back. I'm always looking for you.
I will be back, believe me. I know you're an artist, you teach ceramics and do other things. How does your art reflect you as a woman of the book, a woman of the Bible, a woman living in the land of the Bible?
Well, actually, I'm not a teacher, but I have studied with a wonderful woman. Her name is Michal Verod, for 20 years. And, you know, having 8 children and 20 grandchildren, you must understand how I love babies and children. And so my work is reflected in this. And even my animals, for instance, the opossum that I have up in a tree has 8 little babies on her back. And all our tours go through our garden, and we sit and we have tea and cake, and we talk about where you're from and where you've been, and we have a chance to change ideas. Because, you know, I was very excited when you told me the name of your organization is Bridges for Peace, because we are a people that is so important to us. We promise each of our babies when they are born that they will know peace. It's a promise that's been for 2,000 years. We pray for peace. We pray for it every day with every child. And I think your organization is so amazing, the work that you're doing. And I thank you so much for doing this work and for coming to us to let us give you a little peek inside our lives.
Well, Daniela, it is.
Thank you so much.
It is entirely our pleasure, and thank you for all that you have done in the past to create this beautiful oasis and this marvelous Brigadoon-like place that I really hope our viewers will be your guests, and I cannot wait to be there again, Daniela. But as you say, and we'll say it to our viewers, instead of shalom, we'll say lahitraot, We shall see you soon, Daniela, and we hope that she will see you soon as well. Thank you for watching this episode of Women of the Book. To find out more about our guest or the ministry of Bridges for Peace, please follow these links or visit our website at bridgesforpeace.com.